Hello, hello. I hope you've explored the multiple smart food popcorn flavor options. I went with the white cheddar, and we'll be having movie buttercorn later this afternoon. Hello, everybody. My name is Maureen Tracy Mooney. I'm a senior advisor in the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development here at the U.S. Department of Education, and it's my great honor to help lead our department-wide efforts around eliminating educator shortages. I'm really excited for this closing panel that we have today, focused on how do we improve compensation in states that are leading the way. They are hearing specifically today from Maryland and Nevada. You heard the secretary talk about it. You heard Assistant Secretary Rodriguez talk about it, Missy and Rebecca. Obviously, it's fundamentally critical to the work that we're doing to recruit, retain, and develop the teachers our kids need. So I'll start off. We're going to be beginning today hearing from Dale Templeton and Kathleen Flaherty at the National Education Association that do some really incredible work gathering data on average salaries for our teachers. Then we're going to be hearing from leaders from Maryland, including Cheryl Bose, past president of the Maryland State Education Association, and Kelly Meadows, the assistant state superintendent over the Division of Educator Effectiveness at the Maryland State Department of Education. And then after that, we'll have some Q&A and be hearing from a wonderful team from Nevada. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dale.
Disclosure, I was in Maryland and I was a staff person working with Cheryl up until 11 years ago when I went. So she knows I'm technology challenged, even with the microphones. Good afternoon. I'm Dale Templeton, and I'm the collective bargaining and member advocacy director at NEA. So in addition to compensation, advocacy, and policy, we do bargaining, we do health policy, retirement are the main, and then we also do a little known program called legal services. For those of you that participated during the regional convenings, I've met you, and it's nice to see new folks. You know that my partner, Stacy Pellica, is the director of research, but she is on, let's just say she's on assignment between now and the day after election. But we have Kathleen Flaherty here, who, when you talked earlier, they're talking about math geniuses. Kathleen is. She is one of the authors of the incredible reports that we do at NEA, and so it's really nice to have her here today. And also for those of you that were here before, you've seen some of this data. We do have some new data points, which we will point out. But as you know, that was only 4 months ago. But I want to take 1 minute, now having been at each of these regional convenings, and I think Stacy and I shared that we co-lead the educator shortage work at the National Education Association. And we really started doing that about 5 years ago. And it's a lot of because of the work that we were doing, not only around compensation, but the research and advocacy around so many of the issues that we talked about today. And it was right at the start of the pandemic. And we, you know, how you say you get the assignments when you leave the room. Well, that's how we got the assignments. I think we were, you know, talking about the need to really be looking at this organizationally and all of the factors. And I guess I just want to emphasize it today, just hearing some of all the incredible things that all of you are accomplishing across the country, and having been starting on this work, and apprenticeships is one of them, you know, that Secretary Cardona talked about, the incredible, with 45 states now. When Stacy and I started this work, and we worked at NEA to put together a report, and to see in less than 5 years all of the progress that is being made on all these incredible issues. Oftentimes when we're looking at data and we see that, you know, incremental moves, we forget about the incredible success that have been made, and that's a short period of time. So I think it's just a moment to just really pat yourselves on the back for this incredible movement. And when we talk about it, and I've heard the same words mentioned today, it's that there's no quick fix. And early on in the pandemic, we did hear some trying to have a quick fix. There were some short-term fixes that had to be done, but we need long-term solutions and sustainability. And we've said that, and I see that we've been consistent, and we have a long way to go. And on compensation, this gap that the secretary talked about, that didn't happen overnight. And we are seeing some incremental success, and we've just got to stay the course, and we know what works, and not try to take shortcuts. So with that, let's see if I can do this one. No, I don't. Back to the beginning. Talk about long-term success. Short-term. There we go. Anyhow, so here are the big reports that we do, rankings and estimates, and Kathleen leads a lot of that work. The ESP earnings report, so our educational support professionals, paras, and teacher salary benchmark report, which comes out of my department, and then higher ed faculty salary report, which is also out of research. So those are the four main large pieces of research that we do. And all of that data we usually get out in late March, beginning of April. So some of that data that you're going to hear today, we did share during the regional presentation. Whoops, did I go too far? Again. Yep, how did I must have put my, okay. So this first slide, and again, this is on the benchmark report, and all of this data, there's a QR code, which we'll share at the end. We have these reports, the reports are online, and I think the department has even put some of our information up. But when we looked at our last report, the 22-23 data, 8 states and DC offer at least a $50,000 starting salary. And what we saw in that last report that we released in April was that we saw an average increase of about 3.9% from the prior year, 21-22, in the starting salaries. And that represented the largest increase in the 14 years that my department has been keeping the benchmark reports, not the average salary, which you'll hear. And just a couple of points, a couple of things that we saw on that. First of all, that data is collected, it's over 12,000 school districts. And one of the other points just to mention on that we saw district level salaries increase, judged by the 3.9%, and over 3,000 school districts increased starting salary by at least 5%. So we see that as a positive step forward. We have not seen that in the past. And I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dale. So here we have some data from the rankings and estimates and ESP earnings reports. You can see the national average teacher salary in 2023 was $69,600. This represented a 4.2% increase from the previous year. And this was the highest annual growth that we've seen in over 15 years. So when we look at state averages, though, we can see some states are doing better than others. And we don't have that graph, but you can see it on our website. Only 16 states had annual growth of over 4%. So remaining states had 1 or 2, maybe 3% growth. And on this graph, we can see the problem of teacher salaries not keeping up with inflation. It's not just in the past few years. This has been an ongoing problem. The average teacher salary is 5% less than 10 years ago and 9% less than the peak in 2010 when adjusting for inflation. And it's a similar story for ESPs. National average ESP earnings were only about $36,000 in 2023 in current dollars, 10% less than a decade before when adjusted for inflation. So why does compensation matter? The bottom line is that increasing base pay helps to attract a higher quality and diverse workforce. And there are a couple of measures we can use to judge the adequacy of salaries. The teacher pay penalty, according to the Economic Policy Institute, which has produced reports on this, teachers earn on average 27% less than similarly educated professionals. In the state with the largest penalty, teachers earn about 39% less. Now, some people say, well, teachers get good benefits. Doesn't that make up for the lower pay? But EPI took this into account, and the gap is still 17% when accounting for benefits. Another way we can look at pay is with the living wage. Especially for ESPs, but teachers as well. According to EPI's family budget calculator, ESP earnings are not enough in any state to achieve a modest but adequate standard of living. And this is even by using a conservative measure of one adult, one child family living in the most affordable metro area. So survey research also confirms the problem of low salaries making teaching an unattractive field. Among the 62% of people who said they would not want their child to become a teacher, poor pay and benefits was the top reason why not. And among teachers who intend to leave the profession, 60% cite salary as the reason. So here we can look into a bit more detail. This graph shows that the reasons that teachers who are considering leaving their jobs selected as most important. 70% of all teachers selected the stress and disappointments of teaching aren't worth it. For Black teachers, however, 72% selected the reason of my salary is too low. The latest RAND survey also found that Black teachers were significantly more likely than white teachers to report intentions to leave their jobs in 2024. So this data comes from RAND survey, the American Teacher survey, which they put out every year. In academic research, higher base pay has been linked to lower teacher attrition, and it's not just about teachers, but also relating to students. Higher levels of student achievement and smaller achievement gaps have also been linked to higher base pay for teachers and educators. So how much do teachers think they should be paid? On average, about 16,000 more for them to consider the pay completely adequate. Only 36% of teachers considered their base pay adequate, compared with 51% of similar working adults.
And just one point I want to make on that, what teachers think they should be paid, that 16,000 equates to, when you look at that gap, the EPI gap, that's basically what it equates to. So, and then, so when we talk, excuse me, when we talk about effective educator compensation, what do we mean by that? So one of the things that we do when we work with our affiliates, state and local affiliates, is you need a strong, short salary schedules. It shouldn't take 40 years to get to the top of a pay scale. That's it. You master your career in about 7 to 10 years, and it's about career earnings. And so it's really about making sure that those scales are shortened. I'll share with you an example in a bit of a local that did so in 1 year. It's also about competitive, not just competitive starting salaries, but mid-career and late career earnings. Some of the things that we saw happen when we thought we had a recruitment problem, just a recruitment problem, we put money on the starting salaries, but we didn't do anything with mid to late career. And we started to see retention issues. We also started to see a salary schedule that was not equitable. So making sure you look at that whole schedule. And then again, what we've talked about with everything, to be able to implement what we know will work on the whole recruitment and retention issue, and that's long-term sustainable funding. And again, you'll hear from a couple of panelists here on what they're doing, and I'll share a couple of examples in a few minutes. But in addition to pay, we need to see high quality, affordable health benefits. and we see cost rising, and if costs are rising and salaries aren't, we all know what happens there. And reverting to health plans that are not affordable, not just for our teachers, but for all of our staff, our support professionals in the building, is not what we're looking for. And then additional benefits, some of which have already been discussed: professional growth opportunities, family leave. We have, over the last 4 years, we've seen districts make a lot of progress on making sure that there's more leave. Retirement benefits, housing assistance, childcare, talked about the student debt relief, and we already talked about the student teacher pay during their clinical experience, as well as residency programs. And all of that factors into the ability to recruit and retain. And then, so just a couple of, quickly, just some examples to share. We say it's the states. We say states doing it the right way. Of course, the opposite of that, we're not going to talk about today. We're just being positive and talk about what states are doing. And, and the first one, and we have New Mexico. And I know that that's been discussed. And it's not, when I point out these states, it's not just a 1 year, it's a multiple years and where they're headed. So we talked about in 2022, they provided historic raises, increased starting pay to over 50,000, but they didn't just increase the starting. There's 3 levels. They increased the starting, mid, and late. So they increased to 50, 60, and 70. And they also guaranteed that there'd be a 7% raise for all employees. And then the average teacher that year, the salary got raised by about 17, the average teacher salary raised by about 17%. And we saw in our data in 22-23 that the starting pay rose by almost 18%. So again, just examples of making sure you have that funding and it's sustainable. And then Washington, again, the Cleary decision back several years ago, and they continue to make that effort. The starting is up to now 60,000. The top is at 86, a little over 86, and the administration continues to be supportive and continue to fund. So again, and we talked about what the state of Washington doing is in apprentice programs and other, but also in pay. Then you have Massachusetts. And again, another state that isn't just looking at one aspect of teacher recruitment and retention, they're also looking at pay. And in 2023, scored an unprecedented victory, passing the fair share amendment in question 1, and already generating more revenue than they anticipated in that. And that funding continues to go to schools, colleges, improved transportation. And we saw in our starting salary pay, that starting pay increase in 2022-23 by 3.1% over the prior year. And it ranked 3rd in the nation for average salary, correct? Okay. Make sure I'm correct on that one. And then we did that. Am I going backwards again? Oh. And then here's just a few, another quick examples. And again, you'll have this PowerPoint, so you'll have the data and you'll have the QR code. But Baker City, Oregon, they have, it was a collaborative bargaining process, and they were having an incredible difficulty starting the year with incredible number of vacancies for that area. And what they did is they reduced their salary schedule steps from 16 to 4. And then last year they started with no vacancies. So they raised the pay from a little over 38,000 to 60,000. That was the starting, and then again reduced the steps, and then also that continued. So when they did another contract, a 2-year agreement in which they are also continuing those salary increases. Michigan, we already heard the incredible things that they're doing, the investment they made, and they continue to do that in 2023, 24, and in 25. And again, the salaries are increasing as a result. In Mississippi, state legislature approved the largest increase in state's history with more than 5,000 increase, which was a jump about 10% and a $2,000 raise for teacher assistants. And the starting pay rose by a little over 12% in 2023 as a result of all of that prior work. In Alabama, the historic funding increase in salaries in 22 kept the teachers in schools and decreased the retirement rate. So that's the other piece of this. And with the retirement rate was the lowest in 10 years. So those are just, and again, you're going to hear from Nevada and Maryland to hear the wonderful things that they're doing. And then there's just when we talk about pensions, we want to secure pension plan, defined benefit pension plans. We know the only state that doesn't have that is Alaska. And they deal with shortages, and that's one factor. It's and then an educator, when we're looking at the vesting in those pension plans, we went through a period of time where they were increasing those vesting periods, and our team has been looking and working with states on decreasing those vesting plans, those vesting schedules, so that they vest in their pensions sooner. So we do have fact sheets. It's both on our website, and I believe it's in the QR code. It will be here, and you can see those links. And two recent efforts, just as examples, was New York, where they reduced the final average calculation from 5 to 3, and in Minnesota they reduced the age from 66 to 65. And I think that I'm right on time. So here's the QR code. And again, you'll have this PowerPoint. So I'm going to turn it over. Kelly.
Good afternoon. All right, so Cheryl and I are here to talk about what we have been living and breathing for the last 4 years. It is our lives. It is called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And so in order to talk about teacher compensation, we have to go back to 2016. 2016 is when the Maryland legislature and governor came together and they formed what was called the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. We commonly refer to that as the Kerwin Commission because it was chaired by Dr. Britt Kerwin. And they met for 4 years and really, researched what are the most successful educational countries in the world doing, and how can we use that information and bring it to Maryland. So in 2019, we had our first legislation that passed that was like a Kickstarter, if you will. It was a smaller piece of legislation. There was a massive report that came out, but we knew that it was going to take another year to really finalize the policy and the funding recommendations. So there was that 2019 Kickstart year where there was some money that was invested into the initiatives that we knew were coming. And then in 2020, the reform bill was adopted. And again, that we refer to that as the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So very, very robust piece of legislation. Today, we're really just going to focus on one of the 5 pillars. But before we do that, I'm going to ask Cheryl to talk about her perspective from the union.
Well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. I see some of my colleagues from other state unions, Nevada, Mississippi, Kansas, and Washington. So I'm glad to see that this is collaborative, and happy to be here with NEA and for Kelly to invite me. I'm the past president for the Maryland State Education Association, so I don't have bags underneath my eyes anymore because I'm retired. But as Kelly said, we've been living and breathing this, but it even started before that. We had a Thornton Commission back in the early 2000s, but primarily just looked at funding for our public schools in Maryland. And so when we looked at a renewed look, we knew it had to be comprehensive. It has to look at every part of our pre-K to 12 education and even going into higher education. As you said, we had a multi-year commission. We had, I think it was 26 to 29 commissioners on there. We had a representative, PTA, superintendents, Chamber of Commerce. So you could see it covered a wide swath of this Kerwin Commission. Many reports comparing us to other countries and what we had there in Maryland. And some of the things that we found were not surprising, that we were funding our more affluent schools at a greater rate than our more challenging schools. Our teachers flocked to our less challenging schools than they stayed in the most challenging schools. So some of the same things that you see. But this just doesn't happen because this commission comes out and says, hey, we want to do this. There was a lot of grassroots activity that was happening to build around the state. Hey, this is needed. Your child's school needs X, Y, and Z. In fact, we gave out postcards. If you had $1 million at your child's school, what would you want to see? And we did that with educators. And to Missy's point, like many of these things came out. We knew these things. The ABCDs that Secretary Cardona talked about were there, having a voice. So it was important that stakeholders were involved. It was important that there was a commitment to solve the problem. Now, it wasn't always peaches and cream in this commission. We called it the grand bargain. There were some things that the State Department wanted, didn't get. There were some things we wanted, didn't get. It was kind of looking at this and saying, what can we do to move education in Maryland forward past 2030, moving on for a long time goal. So we rallied support. We held community meetings. Every one of our community meetings had somebody from the Chamber of Commerce there because they saw their workforce development in the work that we were doing. And you will see throughout this as Kelly said, we're focused in on compensation, which everything needs to be negotiated. But one of the things with such an omnibus bill is when it went from the Kerwin Commission to the bill in the legislature, there were some folks who said, well, let's just do this part and this part right now and this part. No, they're all connected. They're very connected. So if you're going to raise educator pay and teacher salaries, that goes along with community schools. That goes along with an emphasis on pre-K and tutoring. That goes along with 75% of the increased funding following the child. Well, because those NBC teachers who are getting more money, hopefully they're in those schools as well. So it all was connected. So we really had to fight to make sure that it wasn't cherry picked and that it was all done comprehensively. Kelly's going to talk about the pillars, but that even focuses in on why each of them were together and they build on each other. Since this has passed, we have had other bills because we've learned. So what's important about this bill is it is dynamic. We are learning. There are things that we changed last year in the legislature that we were like, oh, we didn't necessarily see that when we put the blueprint together. And so that was very important. So we want success in all 5 of the areas that Kelly's going to talk about.
Absolutely. And what I should have mentioned earlier is this is a 12-year plan. So clearly we didn't expect this to happen over a year's time. And it's not cheap. The expectation is that it will cost around $3.5 billion, both state and local funds. So moving to the 5 pillars, and again, we're just going to focus on one of these pillars today. We have early childhood education, as Cheryl shared. We have highly qualified and diverse teachers and leaders, and that is what we're going to hone in on today. There is community schools, resources for students, and then there's an entire pillar dedicated to the governance and accountability of the reform. And in fact, the legislation developed a brand new board called the Accountability and Implementation Board, and that board oversees everything having to do with blueprint initiatives and is basically is the boss. You know, the State Department of Education reports to that board, and everything has to go through that board in order to be implemented. And that's an interesting dynamic that we're also trying to figure out when you've got like all these boards at play. Something to think about.
And that board has funding capability, so they can withhold additional funding. For districts.
Absolutely. So honing in on those high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. So as Cheryl shared, like everything is connected. You can't just raise compensation, but we're also going to expect that our teacher preparation is more rigorous and our licensure requirements are more rigorous.
everyone.
And then comes the teacher compensation. Also improving working conditions by setting minimum percentages for teachers to be involved in planning, collaborative time,
Yeah, let me.
time.
find it.
And so the
Nah.
law establishes the percentages that they spend
There
in
was
the
a
classroom.
convening today.
And then
like
it
a
establishes the
state,
career
it was
ladder for
education
educators, which is
policy at
what
the
we're going to really
Department of
focus on now.
And I've been
So
listening
part
in.
of what this pillar is all about is elevating the teaching profession and allowing teachers the opportunity, good teachers, effective teachers, to stay in the classroom, but still earn a wage that they would normally have to move into that central office or that school-based administrator position to get. So you can see, I know it's small on the screen, I apologize, you'll get these slides, but it's almost like a lattice. So, the state certified teachers down at level 1, and if you want to start moving up the ladder, it's really all about national board certification. So if you, and there are a few areas that National Board does not offer a certification, and for those individuals, they would need to get a master's degree in the area, but the vast majority of teachers will have to get their National Board certification to move up the career ladder. So whether you're going to go into that traditional school-based administrator side, or whether you're going to start tracking up the leadership side, and then you've got a decision to make. The percentage of time that the leaders stay in the classroom is going to slowly be adjusted as you work up the ladder, but you're going to remain in the classroom. So for instance, when you get to what we call the teacher leadership track, which is level 4 up the ladder, it starts with a lead teacher. And you go from spending 60% of your time in the classroom to 50%.
Jacqueline.
And that extra 10% is really there for you to start mentoring your colleagues and providing professional learning at the school level.
If that fits what we're
That
thinking for the day.
professor with lead and then professor teacher, then you're going to 40% in the classroom, and that additional time, now you're mentoring and you're providing professional learning at the district level. Helping with curriculum and all of that stuff. And then we only anticipate about 10% of the teacher workforce to eventually move up into what's called the professor distinguished teacher. At that point in time, you're spending 10% in the classroom, but you're also a faculty member at a teacher preparation program. So one leg in each to make sure that you're not losing focus on what's actually happening on the ground. With these levels comes pay rises. So you're going to see a significant salary increase for your national board certification. That's $7,000, and if you're working at a low performing school, it's an additional $10,000 for a total of $17,000. And then you could choose to stay on that level. There are, it's this entire career ladder is very much collectively bargained. There's a framework in the statute of non-negotiables, basically is what you see on this slide, but then everything else is negotiated. So just looking at the statewide framework, you get that potentially $7,000 to $17,000 stipend for or salary increase for national board. And then should you choose to stay on that teacher leadership track, you're going to get additional funds every time you move up one step of the ladder. There are also funds associated with the school-based administrator, not for the licensed principal, because again, this was all about elevating our teacher leaders and giving them the type of salaries that you would normally have to go into that principalship to get. So there's no salary increase associated with becoming a licensed principal. However, if you do go that route, there's an opportunity for principals to become distinguished principals, and there is a salary raise associated with that step. And there's also salary increases for all of your maintenance of national boards. Every 5 years, you have to maintain your certification. And again, those are collectively bargained, but there are state, local share funding for those increases. Okay, so I'm going to struggle with this one because I don't have my glasses on and the slide didn't print. So I'm going to do this from memory. So from, I want to say July 1st, 2019 through July 1st, 2024, aside from the career ladder and the salary increases that are associated with that, we looked at raising the base pay for all teachers across the state, even those that are going to stay on level 1. So the first phase of that was a 10% salary increase on top of the negotiated increases for all of teachers in Maryland. And so our districts had a number of years to do that. They did it in different ways depending on the district and their needs. We had an infusion of state funds, and I think it was 225 or 255 million. Apologies, I can't read it. That we provided to districts to kickstart that particular portion. Next phase, at the end of that 23, so almost at the end of that phase, the per pupil foundation was raised 13% from 2 fiscal years prior, again, to continue to provide more funding for that initiative. And then by July 1st, 2026, all Maryland teachers will have a minimum salary of $60,000. What we didn't do in Maryland, and listening to some of our other states, what they've done, and something we should probably continue to consider, is there are no minimum requirements for mid, and so it's just that. And so we are seeing some of the things that you talked about where it's front loaded and then it drifts off, and we're going to see attrition again. What we anticipate is raising the per pupil foundation. I want to say it's, again, I can't see that, but I think it's around 33%, or 49%, 49%, thank you, by in over a 10-year period. So incrementally raising that foundation, because that portion of that is going to pay for their salaries. So those are ways that Maryland is funding the initiative. I should mention that the state does not set salaries in Maryland. It is a local decision. And then I'm not going to go into the details of the funding formula, but what I will tell, and it is here for you, and we can certainly provide more language from the statute, but what I will tell you is that it is shared between the states and the local districts, and it is wealth equalized. So our more wealthy counties are going to have a higher local contribution. And that's across the blueprint, not just for this initiative.
On the economic piece, I think it's important, if you don't know about Maryland, we have 24 governments, 24 local governments, 24 school districts. Unlike many of you who have hundreds of school districts, we have 24. Makes it easy in some ways, harder in some ways, but we can track what's happening in those 24. All 24 jurisdictions have to put in additional money. So you can imagine some of the balking that's happening in some of our local districts who are saying, no, the state needs to give us more. Well, the state front loaded a lot of the money into the foundation formulas to give additional money for our students with English language learners, for special education, concentrated poverty. So they front loaded a lot of this, but now it's up to the jurisdictions to start putting the money in. So now you're starting to see some of that. Oh, wait, we didn't know, and we just want this part or that part. I will tell you on the career ladder, even it was pushed a year out because of the pandemic, which I'll get to on that last slide. But when we look at the economic uncertainty, as with anything, we have to continue to fund it. We right now have a governor in Wes Moore who is committed to fully funding the blueprint, which has been very helpful. We have commitments from our legislature, but we don't know what our national picture is going to look like at any given year. So we do have the commitment, but it's important. Inflation, we'll hit this. We did not move up at the rate of inflation, so we weren't keeping up all of the time with that. As Kelly said, it's wealth equalized. So, you know, some of our jurisdictions who are wealthier say, wait, we're paying more for this. Well, yes, you have the means to pay more for that. And some of this is flat dollar amount, which doesn't always hit with inflation. So it is an increase over a 12-year period to see the investment in public education go up. And that was our whole initiative, is our students deserve this. We need to, you know, keep our promise, all of this to education. So economic uncertainty is still out there. You'll see national board supremacy. Kelly talked a lot about in the career ladder, you know, you have to have your national board to move up. Well, we have a lot of pushback from our educators on that item. Value national board certification and its impact on our educators. But not everyone had the means, not every school system was providing incentives, some were, some weren't. To move, we've seen a greater enrollment in national board certification, but we do know by some of the studies, it doesn't help diversify our teaching ranks to have the requirement for national board. So we're still moving through that. The other item is there are a lot of other, like you want to be a reading specialist or a math specialist, you still have to have your master's in those items. So there's a lot of requirements there. And we're not seeing right now, it's early, that $10,000 incentive to work in a most challenging school with your national board certification is not moving people to our most challenging school. So even though that's a $17,000 increase, and your study shows that it's $16,000, they'll keep people there, it's not moving. But that just goes to also show us it's working conditions. It's having a voice. It's being treated with respect and professionalism. Where you see good principals and leaders in districts, you see people moving into those schools. So we, as Kelly said, we don't focus on principals right now. I believe we're going to have to, because now people might go the other way and stay in education and not move into the principalship. So it's always trying to find that balance. One of the items that is also, I should have said on the economic uncertainty, but all of this is pension eligible. So even though the additional money they're getting for national board, the additional money, that 10%, that 60, all of that is pension eligible. So it's very important that it is pension eligible and not any type of a bonus pay. But we know that we need to, as we said, we got to grow your own after this, or grow your own program. So we're constantly tweaking it. And in a post-pandemic world, this bill, the blueprint, calls for an increase of about 10,000 teachers. Right? If it's a 2,000, it's 10,000 teachers. So if I'm going to now be a lead teacher and I'm going to be coaching in everything 40 to 50% of my day, we need more teachers to do that. Well, this was passed as we were shutting down for COVID. And we saw what happened, and we were experiencing, like all of you, the shortage of educators. And so we want to move faster, but we do have a shortage of the folks in our classroom. And Maryland is an import state. We import a lot of our teachers from all the other states, especially Pennsylvania. So we're trying to figure that out with our higher ed partners on how we can do more of these. We do have paid apprenticeships, so we're not one of those that you might be thinking of. So, but it's a reality, and it does impact the effectiveness of moving forward.
With that, we're going to open it up for some questions and answers too. So if you have, I think we still have our mic runners. If you have a question, please raise your hand and a mic will come to you. Right in the back.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Ellen Sherritt. I'm with the Teacher Salary Project. Dale, this is a question for you. We heard the Secretary, the National Teacher of the Year, so eloquently urge everyone in this room to advocate for increased teacher compensation. What is it that you think people here should be doing the most? What does that really look like in reality to you?
Thanks, Ellen. Well, first of all, as you heard from everybody, there has to be sustainable funding, and that funding has to be directed to not only the classroom, but to go to pay. So that's one thing. Because it should be put on the base of the salary. You heard Cheryl talk about making it that not only increases the base each year, but it's pensionable. So you don't want bonus pay. I've been doing this for 40 years, and bonus pay doesn't work. Even in large sums, it might work to get somebody there, but it's not going to work to keep them and retain them. So that's the other thing. As I said, looking at the salary schedules and not just looking at the recruitment piece of it, but you're looking for the retention. So that is the other piece. We do find that we're seeing in collective bargaining jurisdictions and locals that where there's a partner with the union and there's a level playing field there and discussions that the pay is increased, not only at the starting level, but we're seeing even more significant at the top of the level. So I think working with your union partners in a bargaining state around this and problem solving, or if you don't bargain, advocating and working together on that. So those are some of the things that we see. Now, when the Economic Policy Institute started doing the teacher wage gap report in 1996, the gap was only 1.6%. So it took 28 years to get to over a 26 and almost a 26.5% gap. And so it's really making sure those pay, and the reason that gap is there, even though they're seeing salary increases and we're seeing more states with higher salary increases, we're not, two things, we're not, we have to outpace inflation, not just keep up with it. And when you look from state to state, when we're comparing that gap, we're comparing that gap with college educated professionals outside of education. So we are not keeping pace with the pay and benefit structures that other industries and companies are able to pay. And they're the ones that are getting, that's where our folks are going. So the residency programs you hear about, all of the apprenticeships, and looking at it as a whole, in a whole, not just salaries, that is the approach that we need to make. Thank you.
Hi, Dave Griffith with the National Association of Elementary School Principals. I have a question for Maryland, and it's well, comment and a question, I guess. I'm old enough to remember the Thornton Commission. So it started off strong. I don't know what happened there in the mid-range, but let's hope the Kerwin Commission is better. I look forward to the Boast Commission in about 2032, 2033. To pick things up. I did have a question for what Kelly had said earlier. So the minimum salary is going to be $60,000 in 2026, which I assume is essentially a starting salary. And then you said something about hollowing out sort of the teachers that go a little bit longer. And that, sort of looking at your lattice chart too, I was curious about like whether it was intentional as a strategic idea or if it's how it's going to play out. It looks like really significant salary increases are going to come by board certification. And I'm curious about like when you have a starting salary at 60 and any significant increase is going to be board certification. What is going to happen to teachers either that don't pursue it, but have 10 years in, and so it seems like the districts are going to be squeezed at both ends and the middle could be a problem. And then it seems like it could be a bigger problem because as these NBCs move up to these parent teacher roles, professor roles, that like they're not going to have as many teachers to coach. So I was curious about that dynamic and is a concern about it, how you see that playing out, at least right now, knowing it's very early in the process.
Right. So in complete honesty, and I'll ask Cheryl to jump in too, I would be ecstatic to have that problem because at this point, we're so far away from being able to establish level 4, that teacher leadership track, because our percentage of nationally board certified teachers is so low that it will take years and years and years to be able to stand up the structure as theorized. So we're not even thinking about that at this point. I know in theory, again, the percentage of teachers that would ever qualify, not only be eligible, because it's not just about national board certification when you get into that fourth tier. There are eligibility requirements for lead professor and distinguished professor. And so the higher up the ladder you go, the less chance that you're going to have that eligibility in order to move up there. So 10%. We anticipate we'll reach that top tier on both sides, the distinguished principal and the distinguished professor teacher. So I don't, at this point, anticipate that being an issue.
Many of our school districts saw what you were saying, well, I have all these people who aren't going to go up in the career ladder and their pay can't stagnate. And so it was in July that our career ladders, the first drafting, I guess, of them were due by each district. And you'll see that many of the districts mirrored many of those salary lanes with somebody who has a master's or a master's equivalency, because that's where the mass of their teachers are. They're either with the master's or a master's equivalency. I mean, you go into some of our shore districts, they have 3, 4, 5 people who have national board. But even in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is, I think, the 25th largest school district in the country, they have 500 and some. That's not going to get you into a career ladder. So they've mirrored their salary schedules too. So it is increasing the salary for everybody.
Thank you so much. Can we give a round of applause for Marilyn and our NEA experts? And as we're welcoming up our colleagues from Nevada, I just want to just give a shout out and a thank you to MSEA and the state of Maryland for really modeling the kind of collaboration and honest conversations and iterative process and learning that we like to see. It's really hard and it's important. So thank you. Come on up. Adam will be slipping out the name tag here. So very excited to welcome to the stage the Nevada State Education Association Director of Strategy, Alex Marks, Beth Smith, who's the Washoe County Board of Trustees President, and Superintendent Joe Ernst also from Washoe County School District. And with that, I'll hand this over to you, Alex. Thank you very much.
Final act of the day, everybody. This is the closest I'm ever going to get to feeling like Beyonce, so bear with me. My name is Alexander Marks. I'm the Director of Strategy for the Nevada State Education Association. Joining me on stage is the President of the Washoe County Trustees, Beth Smith, and the Superintendent of the Washoe County School District, Joe Ernst. I am with the NSEA. We are the Nevada affiliate of the National Education Association. We represent teachers, we represent education support professionals, administrators, and other licensed professionals in every district throughout Nevada. Again, we are the affiliate union of the NEA, the largest labor union in the country. Our values: solidarity, improving working conditions, racial and social justice, and most importantly for this discussion, respect and dignity. So per the NEA rankings of the states that came out earlier this year, Nevada ranks 48th in per pupil funding. We have the largest class sizes in the nation, and our vacancy rate remains the highest. Now, not the rosiest of pictures, but we are working on various items to help fix that with our colleagues on stage as well. We have advocacy campaigns, we have statement campaigns, we have stakeholder engagement with the Department of Education, both Nevada and now the U.S. Department, and the Commission on School Funding, the American Rescue Plan. I'm also the American Rescue Plan coordinator for Nevada through the NEA. So that was overseeing all the federal dollars throughout Nevada as well. We are a collective bargaining state, like our colleagues and brothers and sisters in Maryland. We again are a state that says right to work, although we're trying to get away from that language because we just think it's kind of a term that's gotten misused over the years. We are a pro-union state. Our state workers have collective bargaining rights. We helped pass that law in 2019. So again, we have locals in every single county. We negotiate the usual terms, pay and benefits. And that's why we're so excited to talk about the work that we've been doing, because it doesn't just stop at the state level. It feeds down to our colleagues at the local levels where we have to bargain for the funds that the state has given each one of our districts. So the American Rescue Plan, I mentioned that just briefly because that brought in about $1 billion for Nevada K-12 education. Secretary Cardona had a letter that came out in about 2021 that said it should go to base salaries. We understand the one-time nature of that. We disagreed with a lot of the districts that they didn't funnel that to our base formula for our folks. Just as the NAA just said that the bonus pays don't work in terms of recruitment and retention, and that was why we were arguing for the base pay. But pay and respect, that was what our guide, that was what our North Star was. Our members did get paid through that, which is great, but we wanted to work to figure out how we can increase that base pay and work with partnerships throughout the state. So again, this is a little bit duplicative, but I'm a fan of repetition because that's really how we got what we got passed, done at the state and local levels. Wage gap, you kind of heard about this a little bit today, but according to the EPI Education Policy Institute, we've got that 26.4% teacher wage gap. In Nevada, that number was about 19 at this point. We like to say that we don't have a shortage of educators. We have a shortage of educators willing to do this profession for 20% less than their college counterparts. So that's what guided us throughout this campaign. So because we were at about 20%, we said, lost my place. Not only with the teacher wage gap, it's the ESP wage gap. So we have folks in Nevada making $10 to $11 an hour. That's not enough to make ends meet. That's barely enough to live or survive. So that was also guided with us. It's not just teacher raises, ESP raises as well. So I think, like Secretary Rodriguez said this morning, with this 26%, that was kind of what was guiding us throughout the entire thing because that wage gap was too much. So politics is fun because you get to see what other states are doing and then steal from them. We stole a lot from New Mexico. No, I'm kidding. New Mexico is doing such great work that we wanted to make sure that we were looking at what they were doing and go, how can we do this in Nevada? They're not that far geographically. We're, proximity in terms of demographics as well. So in 2022, New Mexico Governor Lujan Grisham proposed a 20% salary increase for educators. And I read that and I woke up at about 5:30 in the morning and I texted the other lobbyists in the office and I said, why the F can't we do this in Nevada? Because we're always trying to get our teachers paid. And that was a huge thing for us. So that was literally the genesis of our Time for 20 campaign was a 5:30 in the morning text to the other lobbyists going, how can we just do this in Nevada? It's enough. We've got the money. Let's do it. Let's take a bold stance and get our folks paid. And politics is very much like a window and there was a crack of it open and we said, let's go. We can do it. Let's lift it up. Let's get our folks through it. I introduced you, Time for 20, invest in educators. This was the last 2 years of my entire life. And the reason we said invest in educators is because, this was a response to the lip service we always get. It's politics season. I'm sure we've all gotten political mailers and everybody's telling us what they want to do for public ed, how much they want to fund it. This was our accountability campaign to make sure that our folks got paid. We want that investment now. We don't want the 3%. Kick it to the next legislature with the new people. We need to invest right now. And that's what this campaign was all about. So what is Time for 20? It is a 20% salary increase for every Nevada educator. It was a $20 minimum wage in our schools and average class sizes of 20 students. We used to say 20, 20, 20, and then folks thought we were talking about Tony, 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 if anybody likes R&B, and that didn't work. So we had to figure out another way to do that. But 20% salary increase for every Nevada educator basically is exactly what we've been hearing from everybody all morning, the 26% wage gap. In Nevada, that was 20. Our measures to get that done were the K-12 funding bill, $20 minimum wage in our schools just to keep up with inflation, make sure we're taking care of our ESPs and average class sizes of 20 students to look like, the ratios that are being recommended at every level from every department. How do you pay for it? I guess I could attribute that quote to literally everybody but an SEA, but we figured out a way to do it. So what started as a very aspirational campaign became a reality in December 2022. We have the casinos, and after COVID, everybody wanted to come to Vegas and spend money. We had record surpluses. We had about $1 billion in surplus. The Economic Forum budgeted, I think, about 2.3 extra for the next biennium, and that's a lot of money. And I'm also a big fan of the group Public Enemy. Harder than you think, it's a beautiful thing. So let's do it. If it's hard, that's why it's worth it. So how do you pay for it? We figured out a way to pay for it. So we went to the legislature, we laid out this whole plan, we figured it out. We said, this is the bold action you guys got to take. The number 20 was the buzzword the entire session. Every time the word 20 came up, even if it was unrelated to me, I'd still get dirty looks from legislators because they're going, oh, that's what I'm thinking of now. It's time for 20. So in relation to time for 20, there's also a supplemental bill called Senate Bill 231. So this was a measure to add an additional $250 million to the pot to be combined with the bargained amount at the local level, which you'll hear from our colleagues about how that worked. We offered an amendment to double that because we had the money. And it was basically a choice between doubling the amount or putting it in a rainy day reserve. And we said, absolutely not. It's pouring. Why would we put it in a rainy day reserve now? We've got historic vacancies, overcrowded classrooms. And if that's not a rainy day, I hate to hear what one is in Nevada. So we solved this issue. The one part of this is that because it was a separate bill, it wasn't built into the K-12 funding formula. And that's a problem because then that gets us into that American Rescue Plan one-time money issue. But we solved that at the bargaining table, which is going to become important later on. So I'm like Quentin Tarantinoing it. I'm telling you the end now, but pay attention to the end. It's coming. So it's a rainy day in Nevada. We held the largest rally in Carson City history outside of the Nevada legislature. So you'll see just a little bit of our social media campaign. We had a ledge crisis grant through the NEA, which helped us hire ambassadors, member organizers, basically everybody from the top down. It was as grassroots as you could say, forcing the legislature to say no, which they didn't, which was great. So, this is the rally outside of Carson City. We did these little con film festival type things and had our members post all the posters out there, email folks. Time for 20, it's a rainy day in Carson City. We had a lot of folks out there with their umbrellas. It was a beautiful 90 degrees out there, so the umbrellas looked even better. And real quick, we'll just show you this quick video.
We cannot afford to stash away nearly $3 billion in rainy day accounts while we are standing in a downpour. What time is it? We need to make clear to everyone in the building behind me and the building down the way that we must invest in our students today.
That was time for 20. That was again, to kind of prevent the lip service that we've been getting. This was a grassroots campaign outside of the legislature. They had committee hearings going on. They could hear us from outside of them. They were very annoyed, but that's again, like the power of a union right outside their door. They couldn't say no to giving educators that 20% salary increase. So the reason we got that salary increase, not only was the advocacy campaign, but because of our partnership. So throughout the state, we maintain a great working relationship with our school trustees and superintendents. So in Washoe County, President Smith, along with the superintendent at the time, Enfield, actually spoke at our rally. So having that buy-in, that investment from the local level made it so much easier at the bargaining table to go, okay, here's that pot of money. We're not fighting about it. You're on board. You got the investment. From the get-go, it was an investment that we made, not only the state, but with our local trustees as well. Because we know that money flows down from the state to the local level. So we wanted to make sure that that was built in with our entire campaign from the get-go. So we've got some photos of the signature when we passed time for 20 in Washoe. We did a rally in February, and then we bookended it with the one in May. That's a superintendent from Carson City, AJ Fueling. So we've got, a lot of superintendents came out and spoke because they too know the value of paying their folks and their staff members. So real quick, and then we'll kick it over to Washoe. The sunset language is probably the most important part because this is built-in accountability. How many people have heard that term anywhere in any political room, right? They love that word, accountability. What does it mean? In this term, it meant rather that we were going to build it in to make sure that this money wasn't just one time. So we created a loophole around. So I think I mentioned the language basically was one time, so it was going to go away. The bill was just not written the way it should have been. If you want to get members paid, pay your teachers. That was kind of simple, but they did a lot of hoops to jump through, which you'll hear from. But we found a solution to make sure that our folks got paid. So because of our partnerships, districts all agreed to this language, basically saying that because these funds will expire in 2025, we're all going to go to Carson City. We're going to hold hands. We're going to stand in front of the legislature and go, you are absolutely not giving our folks a pay cut. Absolutely not. These funds need to be continued and extended. The funds need to be moved into the K-12 funding formula so that we don't have to go in 2027. I know that gives me heartburn. I don't want to hear about what's going on then, but we don't want to have to keep doing this every 2 years. We're a biennial legislative session. So fix this issue now, put it into the K-12 formula. That actually reflects the position of our 2023 amendment, which would have fixed this issue to begin with. But I think what's important too is a lot of the paychecks now that our districts get will actually say 231 funds, and it quantifies it right there. So now I can walk up and say, Alex Marks is going to get a pay cut of $230 if you don't pass this bill. And we're going to have a lot of educators just basically wearing pins and buttons and stickers of what their pay cut will be if they don't do that. So we've built in the accountability. We've got our partnerships ready to go. I don't think it's going to be a heavy lift not to do that, but it's in terms of where's the revenue coming from. It's that discussion that everybody has at every legislature. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But I love that built-in accountability. This was the Time for 20 session. Chuck D and Flavor Flav would be very proud because Harder Than You Think was a beautiful thing. Here's where we got. Over half of our counties negotiated a 20% salary increase. That's over 50% of them. So 9 of 17 got a 20% salary increase. Classified members in Clark County School District got a bump to $15 an hour, down from $10.73. Is that enough? Absolutely not. We're always going to be advocating for our ESPs on those. But to increase it almost $5 for a lot of these folks goes a long way. That keeps these folks in the district. That keeps these folks happier. Several of our counties got to 15. There's a few to 10 to 14, but that's nothing to yawn at. Like, you know, I mean, to boost the salary almost 15%. I'm greedy. I wanted 20, but I will take 15. They just don't get a little sticker on my map because I got to stay consistent somewhere. But I think, you know, this is work that's not done. Our work is never done. We all know that in this room, but this is a great place to start. This is, you know, 18 months of advocacy. This is our members testifying. This is our members writing letters. True power of a union right there on a map for, you know, 9 of 17 counties getting a 20% salary increase. It was doable. We made sure they knew it was doable. And 2020, Tony, whichever, it got done. And how it got done is because we have amazing partners. NSCA runs a very robust political program as well. Politics, I know. But the reason we do that is because we have to elect great folks like President Beth Smith to the trustees who understand the value of not only unions, but union partnerships, the you know, incredible work not only our teachers are doing, but our education support professionals are doing. So when we endorse folks and try to get them elected, this is exactly who we're trying to get elected for our members. And it worked out perfectly on Time for 20. And, you know, she's been a hell of an advocate. And I will kick it over to President Beth Smith. And I thank you all for your time.
Hi, everyone. All right, so I am so excited to be here today. So I'm Beth Smith from the Washoe County School District. I'm the proud president of our board. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to who Washoe County is. So you can see who we are up here on this slide. So we're within the top 1% of school districts based on enrollment. We serve a community of almost 7,000 square miles. And we like to say that we're an urban district with a rural heart. So we're one of 17 districts in Nevada. So in terms of overall governing bodies within a state, we're relatively small. Okay, so where we were when we began this process, we had some challenges ahead of us, but we also had some transformative opportunities. So when we went into the 23 legislature, we were only funded at $6,500 per student. And within the entire state of Nevada, we received the least amount of funding. Most of our teachers were working multiple jobs. We've heard that today. And we also heard earlier from Jarvis Lundy from the Hunt Institute about educators not being able to even afford living in the communities where they were serving. And so we knew that we really had to take action, but we also had some opportunities. And this really took the place of a new school board. We were a relatively young board, and we had a belief system around really serving our community. And then if you remember in the video that Alex showed, we heard one of those legislators. Well, she's one of our educators in the Washoe County School District. In the 23 legislature, we brought up 2 educators who were now assembly people, and our former board president also moved up to the assembly. So when we look at all of these pieces coming together, it is making sure that we have people in those state houses that really believe in public education. And then the last part with this slide, and I chose this word carefully, relevatory. We work with our labor associations. We are not oppositional to them. That does not mean we always agree, but it does mean that we're pointed in the same direction. And so that's why our board was on board. Before Time for 20 even was a formalized program, this was something that we believed in with actually paying our educators. We put in our legislative platform that compensating our professionals as valued professionals was one of our top priorities. We got together with our association members, really listened to them, and collaborated with the state lawmakers. And the reason why this is important is because we've talked about a lot of things today, but at least for us in Nevada, we have a school board. And so school boards are a place where good ideas could get mired in politics, or it can be a place where you really amplify and champion great ideas. And so what we were asking was for the state to do their part, which was allocating the funding, improving the laws. But the reality is it's at the school board level. It was my colleagues, our responsibility to manage the local governance and actually make sure that we were carrying through all these programs. And I'm really proud to say, you see the pictures of my colleagues up here. We are by and large a group that practices servant leadership, and it's really central to how we actually do this work for our community. And that brings us to our partnership with the Washoe Education Association, which I'll refer to as the WEA. This was really listening to them. So we also heard earlier from Dr. Patterson from Illinois, if you listen, we will stay. That's what our board was doing. We were actually having mixers and gatherings with our associations, bearing witness to the lived experience that they were having in the classrooms, what it was that they needed, and really truly understanding them. And that really brought us to a place of optimism, tenacity, and respect, knowing that we were going to be achieving something good. And again, that doesn't always mean agreeing, but it does mean that we're focused on the same outcome, which for us was the mutual recognition that educators are the foundation of our academic success. But it wasn't just as easy as asking for money. So while the legislature was in session and we were pushing all of these initiatives, they said, okay, full stop. We want all the districts to actually come and present in the middle of the session to talk about what we were facing, what we might do with the money, and really discuss how we had been fiscally responsible in the past, among other things. So what you see here is we did a presentation to a joint meeting of the Assembly Ways and Means and Senate Finance Committees, and we gave it to them straight. We showed them how we had spent our COVID relief funding because it's very important to be fiscally responsible, but we were undoubtedly clear that we would be taking a people-first approach and also making systemic improvements. And also in this presentation, we showed them the strong alignment between the Board of Trustees, the superintendent, and the employee associations. And this was incredibly important because they really wanted to know what our plans were, and we were able to say that publicly. And we also told them very directly about what the grave concerns are. We can't pour from an empty cup. When we're only being funded at $6,500 per student, there is no way for us to go through and really deliver on these increases. And so we made it very, very clear to them that in Washoe County, we had a clear commitment that our children deserve high quality educators who are compensated as valued professionals. And we got really, really strong responses from our legislators with that message and made it very, very clear to them, because I know of no other career that requires its professionals to be as educated and continually educated as our teachers, yet expects them to do this work. And I will say to everyone, I stop and I say this every single time I see a meme on Facebook where people talk about, oh, you should just be rewarded because you're doing this work for our children. And I have to tell you, and I will invite you to full stop whenever somebody says that, because it sends a message that that alone is the work that you do and what you are valued by. And I believe you can absolutely invest in our children and invest in their futures and not tell them that you also can't put food on the table or a roof over your head. So the good news, after all this advocacy and all of this work, we did. They actually passed the legislation, and our base per pupil funding increased from $6,500 to about $9,300 in fiscal year 24. And when everything was all put together, it resulted in a net surplus of about $76 million. But you think that would be the good point, and it was great. But now the work was really going to begin because we turned our attention over to the work that had to be done next. And so I'll bring your attention to the word elevating in that second bullet, because compensation is a central tenet to advancing the profession of education. But you only achieve elevation when you synergize compensation with systemic evolution. And so now it was time to walk our talk and actually deliver to our community and to our educators and to our students. And so to talk more about the specifics of what we did, I'm going to invite up Washoe County School District Superintendent Joe Ernst.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. That was queued up very nicely because I get the fun part now. And I will tell you, as a lifelong educator, I've been in education over 25 years, many, many years as a teacher. In fact, starting out in Washoe County School District, I think I was in the neighborhood of $22,000 on that first year of teaching. And so this is an experience that I have partaken in. I came into education with a deep-seated belief in kids. I advanced through the system, principal, area superintendent, and have taken on many different positions. The day that you see up here is one of the best days that I have been a part of in Washoe County School District. We had a celebration. So you can see that it was 20% over 2 years. And there's a video in the PowerPoint that will show teacher testimony on this day. And as teachers provided testimony about the second jobs that they've had, about the lack of ability to get affordable housing, about the challenges of which have been discussed today, we were able to celebrate. And I think one of the things that we really are trying to drive home is you have an association, a board, and a school district, all identifying teacher compensation as a priority. And today, this day was one of the best days that I've had in Washoe County School District. Teachers came, they talked about it, and I could not help myself. I stayed at the back of the room, and after each teacher testified, gave them high fives because I knew what they were feeling. And again, this came because of a lot of great work that was done to create this. Some of the mechanics behind Senate Bill 231, we all overall as a state, 250 million. But really the idea here is about catalyzing school districts to provide increases. So it's really dedicated to making sure that it's going towards teacher compensation. And so really pleased that the work, the advocacy led to our legislatures really identifying this as a priority. And you can see that it couldn't replace other compensation, but it must only expand it. So really based on maybe some prior funding mechanism experiences, you could see here that that was built in. And Washoe County, you can see that the match was not automatic. Now had to request the funding from the state. And so what you see there is you can see that you're looking at approximately $40 million from SB 231. The match was retroactive to go back to the start of that school year. I will say, having overseen the grants department recently, sometimes the timing and the release of funds can make a substantial difference. And would always say to all that the faster we can move those along, the better it's going to be for the kids. And that's what we always have to keep at the front of our mind. One of the things that it allowed us to do is then we looked at other systemic improvements. And one of the things that's really stood out to me today is the dimension and the layers that are associated with this topic. early in the day, we heard about a couple of themes that teachers really want, and that was around, we heard behavior, we heard chronic absenteeism, and in general, support for the work that they're doing. And so when you're looking at recruitment, you're looking at retention, we're really working to balance the many needs, the many components of this within some of the other funding that we looked at. One of the things that we did is we looked at our most underperforming schools, and we were able to reduce the class sizes of those schools. We looked at the administrative support. Did my heart justice as a principal for many years during our discussion today around the importance of principal leadership to really support teachers as a whole. It is a really large aspect. And one of the things that our board, in conjunction with our staff, prioritized was looking at more administrative support across the board. So that was down in elementary schools, down in our middle schools, and primarily around some of the things that we saw come, or at least were underlined as a result of the pandemic, and that was around increased behavior in buildings. And so really trying to make sure that we were providing the support necessary for teachers because of the retention side of this. Also looking at chronic absenteeism. And then one of the things that we were able to do is name some of our priorities. As I know many of you are aware, often school districts are cobbling together budgets, some of which is grant funded. Grant funding at maybe its best rolls into general funding after a program has been seeded and has had success, and now you're able to roll it in. And so what we were able to do is really name some of our priorities as a school district by now funding positions within the general fund and then looking at new grant funded positions. And then a lot of the creative work that was done was not just around SB 231. You know, today as I've been sitting here, I think urgency. And I have felt that from the moment I've started education through today and hearing the conversation that we're all involved in. There is urgency on every front. And while it's important that we're working with our legislative bodies, our associations, there's also things that we as a school district needed to make sure that we were doing in the immediate to support. And you can see that over 2 years, we established memorandums of understanding with our teacher associations. Because if recruitment and we don't have enough teachers, that means the teachers that we do have are probably doing a lot of extra work. And we heard today again about compensating them. Teachers come into this profession because of the desire to impact our students' lives. They're willing to take on some of this addition, but we know as a school district, as a board, that we wanted to compensate that. And so when we looked at special education teachers and some of the need that we had there, having some of our existing special education teachers work to support caseload management from the other special education teachers. And so not only was it a legislative priority, but as a school district, we identified it early on and we're really working to come up with creative structures that would allow us to use vacancy savings. So many of the school districts are having vacancy savings, taking these, working with our associations and repurposing that money back to staff in really agreed upon and positive ways. And then this is where I guess I get to finish a little bit. Again, it's been quite an educational day. I have so enjoyed the many presentations and the dimension to of this topic today. Starting our school year, it was really, really rewarding to have a staff that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 employees, and to start our school year with 10 unfilled classroom positions. That, you know, when we say teachers, principals, and educational staff are the cornerstones of improving education, this is certainly a great step in that direction. And not only just teachers and principals, but you look at our bus drivers. I know that many of us were facing critical times during the pandemic around transportation. This year, 100% fully staffed bus drivers. You can also see that we decreased walk zones and expanded service for over 2,000 students. And so compensation does matter. Increase to funding does matter. And these are some of the things that you can immediately see just 1 year later as evidence of that. And then employee morale, critical. Retention of employees. We saw, again, when you go back to the 10 unfilled vacancies, we had a lot more staff that was willing to stay on and teach longer because they could see some of these positive changes. And it certainly has reduced a reliance on retirees or critical needs, of which we've kind of talked about today. And so that's where we conclude. I think it has been just a very positive day, and really happy to share some of the good work that has been happening at the state level within our school district, and to share that with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Ernst. We're going to call an audible, given the time. Instead of having a moderated Q&A right now, I'm hoping our Nevada team is not running for flights immediately after this out. Wonderful. So they're going to be around during our connection hour for any questions that you have. I'm not going to give our presentation on resources at the department. I'm going to do an enticing trailer to motivate you to check out these slides later. I'm just going to skip ahead. Very excited that there's now more people working in our public schools than before the pandemic and at any time in the last decade. We know teacher shortages remain. We're focused on some key strategies to address them, including the 3 focused on today: compensation, diversity, and high quality and affordable prep. We've made some big, taken some big, bold steps and supported some big, bold efforts by states and districts to address these challenges. You've heard the Secretary talking about them, and Assistant Secretary Rodriguez. And it's exciting, and there's more to do. We want to make sure that you're aware of some of these key pieces of work across strategies, some policy briefs that have some great state-by-state data visuals that you can take a look at and make it a little bit easier to access data. If you look at your agenda, there's a QR code, and you're on your Raise the Bar one pager, there's a QR code that takes you to our Raise the Bar Eliminating Educator Shortages website, where you can find all of these. And there's a bunch of federal funding from the department that can help support these efforts on educator preparation. These are some useful resources on our Raise the Bar website. Won't walk through all of them, but there's more on the website. These are some particularly key ones that we hope that you take a look at. And there's your QR code. Nikki, can you come to the stage? Just want to give a shout out to our events team. And Nikki Churchwell and OPPD, who's been really the magic behind today. So thank you so much, Nikki. There you go.
Let's give a thanks to our panel, last panel of the day. Thank you. I know that's hard. Thank you to all of our presenters today. This has been a content-filled day. I appreciate you all sticking with us, all the great questions. And we have also want to make sure I thank our donors who made these regional convenings in the Capstone event possible, the Carnegie Corporation of New York and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Want to shout out to our fearless partners who have done all of these convenings with us, Teach.org and the Hunt Institute. Thank you, thank you. And we have a last optional session for the day, our connection and reflection hour. We've given you some prompts here to think about while you munch on the snacks generously provided for by the Hunt Institute. So thank you all again for today. Please stick around for our connection and reflection hour. And we will look forward to seeing you again in the near future. The snacks are coming into here. So the more snacks will be coming in momentarily. Thank you. Thank you.